Welcome to the Weird Gig Podcast. I'm your host, Kara Kesselring. We're celebrating our 12th episode of the season with my special guest, music director and pianist, Taylor Peckham. Taylor and I worked together and became friends on the Broadway show Jersey Boys. Taylor and I discuss a weird gig about chairs. Yes, you heard right. All songs about chairs. A trip to Hungary, and the pinch me moment of working on music in New York with Alex Lacamoire. But first, Taylor's weirdest gig story. Are some gigs beyond saving?
Have you ever been involved with something that was going so badly that you just wanted to quit and walk away? What if you couldn't just quit and walk away because the people in charge had already quit and walked away? Would you try to stick it out? Would you try to make the best of it? Are some gigs beyond saving? Well, buckle up. I'm Taylor Peckham, and this is my weird gig. It's 2010. I'm living in my hometown of San Diego, driving down the freeway, as you often do in San Diego, when I get a call on my cell phone. That call was from the mother of a few of my youth theater friends that I had not heard from in years. For this story, let's call her Lori. Although Lori and I knew each other after her two daughters, who were friends of mine, for this story, let's call them Kiki and Priscilla. After they graduated and left the program, I never really expected to hear from any of them again. Until I did. Okay, I'm in San Diego. I'm driving down the freeway. Lori calls. Lori has two daughters, Kiki and Priscilla. They'll join the story in a bit. I just want to make sure you're following along. I answer the phone.
Taylor, hi, it's Lori. Remember me? Kiki and Priscilla's mom? From your youth theater days?
See, even Lori sounded surprised.
I'm the drama director at Big Church Academy, and we're right in the middle of rehearsing our school musical. Unfortunately, both our music director and choreographer just quit the show yesterday, and I'm looking for someone to save the day and come in to help us do the show. Are you available?
Okay, a few things. Big Church Academy is not its real name, but it was a small school attached to an appropriately big church. When I say big, I mean to say that the church holds about 4,000 people. And you'll remember that Lori mentioned her music director and choreographer having just quit at the same time. In hindsight, that probably should have been a red flag, but let's also not forget that I was just starting out in my music career, and I tried to take every single job I could get. It also, in hindsight, wouldn't be the last red flag. Hey Lori, great to hear from you. Do you have any other details for the job? When's the show? When do you rehearse? Are you using a band or backing tracks?
Sure thing. The first performance is in 10 days.
Red flag.
We rehearse every weekday during our drama class from 1 o'clock to 1:40.
Redder flag.
And we're looking to perform the show using backing tracks that haven't been made just yet.
And the reddest flag. I definitely should have said no after hearing that. But instead, sounds great to me. When do we start?
Tomorrow.
I'll see you then. The next day, I show up to Big Church Academy. I walk past the 4,000 seats through the halls of the school and find my way to Lori's classroom. There, I see Lori and her two daughters, my old youth theater friends, Kiki and Priscilla, happy to see me. It had been years since I saw them. Hey, what are you two doing here?
We're here helping our mom with the show.
All right, cool, whatever. A few minutes later, the kids showed up for class time and for my first music rehearsal with them. Now, it's important to know that they had been rehearsing the show for 2 weeks already, and let's not forget that there were only 10 days to the first performance. So naturally, I expected them to know, I don't know, most of the songs? Some of the songs? Any of the songs?
Hey everyone, this is Taylor, the new music director. Let's make sure to give him our full attention as we start to learn the music for the show.
Did she say start to learn the music? Okay, well, good thing we have a few hours every day to really dive in and learn what's that? 40 minutes a day? Well, good thing the kids are really talented and definitely paying attention and working hard what's that? They suck and don't give a crap? Well, good thing it's only going to be a small, casual performance for a few friends and what? They want to perform the show in the 4,000-seat big church next door? Well, this is going to be great. So, we rehearsed. I used the term loosely, the kids really weren't doing anything. The days went by, the performance date got closer and closer, and things were not getting better. If anything, they were actually getting worse. I don't really know how, but they definitely were. I was doing everything I could to try and get them to learn the songs, to pay attention, to not have farting contests during class, but nothing was working. It didn't take much for me to understand why the old music director had pieced the F out of there. Now I was trying to find a way out myself. One of the many things I learned in my time spent in youth theater was, if the kids don't know what they're doing, it doesn't look bad on the kids, they're kids. It looks bad on the people in charge. If the kids don't know the dances, it's the choreographer's fault. If the kids don't know their lines, it's the director's fault. If the kids don't know the songs, it's the music director's fault. As the show was now only a few days away, Lori, Kiki, and Priscilla could all tell that the show was more or less a complete disaster, and they needed to come up with a way to get out of being blamed for it. What they ended up doing was, well, the next day their desperate plan to avoid the blame took shape. I arrived for class and noticed that Kiki, who normally was running around trying to keep the kids under control, was instead sitting at her mom's desk, not doing anything, with her right arm in a sling. Kiki, are you alright? What happened?
Oh yeah, I was playing volleyball and hurt my shoulders, so I don't know if I can help with the show anymore.
The day after that, I noticed that Priscilla had joined her sister off to the side, sitting out from rehearsal time, now wearing a medical boot and using crutches.
Oh yeah, I was at the beach and a big wave screwed up my knees, so I don't know if I can help with the show either.
In case you're not keeping score, 2 of the 3 main people involved with putting this show together now looked like they had both been thrown off a horse. But I had a nagging suspicion none of it was real. The only one left was Lori. I think you can see where this is going. The next day, 2 days before the audience would witness just how bad this show really was, Lori, the director, rolls into the classroom in a wheelchair with casts on both of her legs. No one could say she wasn't committed.
Oh yeah, I was gardening and I hurt both of my legs, so I don't know if I can direct the show anymore.
This was her show at her school. She hired me. She set this all up, made it into a disaster, and now was rolling away from it, putting all the blame on me and this new choreographer. It was equal parts unbelievable and, honestly, hilarious. After class, I talked with the choreographer. What are we going to do? Should we just cancel the show? Unless we find a way to make this work in 48 hours, we're both going to be made to look like idiots. She said she would do her best to save the dances if I would do my best to save the songs. Save the songs? What could I do to save the songs? It was 2 days away and the kids legitimately had no idea what they were doing. I had an idea. This is Big Church Academy. They're going to be performing in a very big church. They're using backing tracks anyway. Maybe we could just pre-record everything. Even the solos. They can either lip sync along as best they can, or they can just stand there. I don't care. It's better than nothing, I guess. So that's what we did. I set up a makeshift recording studio at Lori's house, had all the kids come over after school, record their parts individually. That was a blast. Then I stayed up all night that night, mixing it together so it sounded like they knew what they were doing. I did my best to save the songs. To save the dances, the choreographer basically had them all hold hands and sway. Whatever, it worked. I don't know how, but we made it happen. Of course, when I say we, I mean me and the choreographer, not the members of the I'd rather literally break both my legs than say I was a part of this club. And so, the day arrived. As the tracks played, the kids swayed, we all sat there. Me, the choreographer, Kiki in her sling, Priscilla in her crutches, and Lori in her wheelchair. And we watched the weirdest, most unimpressive kids karaoke version of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat performed for about 200 people in a 4,000-seat church. I grew up a hell of a lot in those 10 days. I learned a lot of really important lessons that would save me from similar situations in years to come. And best of all, I got to share it with you, my weird gig friends. Somewhere out there is a picture of the 5 of us at school that day when Lori showed up in her wheelchair as proof that this all actually happened. But I have yet to find it. I'll let you know if I ever do.
We'll be right back with more from Taylor Peckham. I'm so glad that you are joining me for the Weird Gig podcast.
Me too.
I'm here with my friend Taylor Peckham, who is a dear friend of mine from San Diego.
See.
So, Taylor, tell the listeners who you are and how we know each other through the music world.
Hey everybody. What's good? What's shaking? Good to be with you. Oh, should I keep going? Okay.
Yes.
I met Kara. We met on the road, on tour.
On the road.
Doing Jersey Boys, that I'm sure at least a handful of other alumni will be featured on this podcast. I can only imagine, because everybody's got stories of their crazy, weird gigs, and I always love hearing them. So what a fantastic idea to put them all in one place for everybody to hear. It's so fantastic. So anyway, I met Kara when I had joined the second national tour in 2014. And I think I met her that same year, a little bit later, when we had come back from a break in Los Angeles.
Right.
And we met together touring for a couple years, and shared a lot of memories and a lot of stories and a lot of fun, weird gigs. And I got to know her family. And so we've known each other since 2014. So 7 years now we've been friends.
So good. Tell the listeners the farthest gig that you've had an opportunity to play or do music in.
Well, I didn't necessarily play music, but I worked on a music project for, there's one of the production houses in New York when I was living there that own quite a few theaters in town. There's the Schuberts, and then there's the Nederlanders. And the Nederlanders hired me for a show that was a big hit in Europe. And they were trying to adapt it and have it come to New York and possibly play on Broadway. But the show first premiered in Hungary, in how we say Budapest, but they say Budapest, like shh, be quiet kind of pronunciation. And so they The show originally premiered, I think, in the early 80s, and it ran every year in Hungary. And they were looking to kind of freshen up the music a little bit, to make it a little more contemporary and maybe something that younger people would want to listen to. And so they said, hey, are you free to go to Hungary to meet and work with the composer over in Hungary to see if you could, I don't know, work on the music and arrange the music, or maybe produce the music or rewrite some of the music. So I went over there, and I met with this guy who was a huge star in Hungary. So I, unfortunately, was not lucky enough to know this guy. I wasn't super familiar with him, but he was very familiar with him. He was very aware of himself. And so we went over there, and they wanted me to work with him to maybe, change the keys and to add some beats behind the music to make it sound a little less. Everything sounded like a kind of like a lullaby. And they wanted it to be exciting and to be, whatever. So I went over there, and guess who didn't want to change the music at all? Him. He didn't want it. Yeah. So I basically got a free trip, a paid trip to Budapest, Hungary, and worked in this guy's studio, even though we didn't change a single thing.
Wow.
And we came back to the States, and we did a workshop, and it was terrible, and it never went anywhere. So that's the story of that.
That is a crazy anecdote. What's the hardest you've ever laughed on a gig?
I was hired by a museum, an art museum. They were doing an exhibit of chairs. They were doing different chairs from different periods of history.
Okay.
Maybe a couple movie props.
Okay.
I think one of the things was the fighter pilot seat from Top Gun.
Sure.
It was such a crazy, weird thing. And they were opening the exhibit, and they wanted some performers to sing some songs about chairs.
Of course they did.
So we had Sit Down, You're Rockin' the Boat from Guys and Dolls, all of these funny things. And I just remember being present for that gig and looking around at all of these crazy rich old people who did not give a crap about any of this. And they had worked so hard to come up with these very curated, and then we'll do this because it relates to this 5th century Roman chair that they have. And nobody cared at all. And I was laughing so hard just through the whole thing because of how absurd it was.
Have you ever felt like a poser on a gig? Like, not a poser, but in over your head?
Ooh. Well,
I only ask this because I know that you are one of the most dedicated and prepared musicians I've ever met, in terms of, like, if you don't have it immediately, you're going to work at it through the night, all weekend long, practice, practice, practice. I don't see you ever showing up somewhere and being ill prepared.
I appreciate that. There was one time where literally we were shooting a video that was going to play when they were acknowledging the band in general to this show I was doing. So we were doing this. There's a band called the Flaming Lips that I hope anybody listening to this knows who they are. But anyway, they were turning their album into a show called Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. And it's basically a metaphorical battle of this girl battling cancer. And so the pink robots represented her cancer cells. And it's a whole story of her cancer, her battle with cancer and all these things. And so at the end, we as a band were not seen by the audience, but they wanted to gesture, there's live people playing this music. So they had a film shoot where there were only 4 or 5 of us in the band, and we were playing our instruments littered amongst people in robot costumes. And so the robots would be holding instruments and faking it amongst us who were playing fake instruments and trying to look like we were playing along to this music. And I remember I was plunking along on a prop fake keyboard. Our guitar player luckily just had to hold one of his guitars because who cares? But our drummer, who's a friend of mine, Brian, they just gave him a single cymbal. And they were like, yeah, drum along on the cymbal. So this like $10 million show, and they couldn't get a drum kit for this guy to sit at. He was just pounding along with a stick on a cymbal. That was probably the most time I felt like a poser, like I was faking it, because I looked around and was like,
literally faking it.
This was the most absurd thing ever.
Yeah.
There was another time when I did a Christmas show at the Hotel del Coronado, which is here in San Diego. And it was this big thing where they set the Christmas show 100 years in the past from the year when they were having it. So I did it in 2009. So it was set in 1909. And they said, hey, could you learn some ragtime stuff, some Scott Joplin stuff? And I had never played Scott Joplin before, ever. So I put in the time and I learned it and I felt pretty good about it. And the show came and I just sucked. I just ate, you know what, all over the place. And I face planted musically. And I just remember faking my way to the end. Then that's the end. And then I just stood up and left. And that was, luckily, it wasn't so bad. We did maybe 20 performances or so. And luckily, it wasn't that bad every time, but it was definitely that bad the first time. And I just remember other musician people coming up to me and just being like, it happens to all of us. It's okay. You did your best.
It is hard. It's that stride piano. It's like hands are flying.
Oh yeah. And when I got nervous, I just absolutely just face planted. It was so bad. I overcame like a genre of music I wasn't familiar with later when I was playing this Shakespeare play. It was solo piano accompanying this 3-hour Shakespeare play. And it was this contemporary classical composer named Michael Torkey who had written this brand new score. It was the most difficult music I'd ever played or had been hired to play. And I was feeling very like imposter syndrome, big time, because I knew there were so many other players that could play this better than I was. Yeah. But I had really put in some time and just was practicing my heart out. And we got to the thing and I was feeling very self-conscious, and he came out from Vegas to see it and to meet with me and to whatever. And he was really supportive and happy with how it sounded. And I felt really confident, and it made me feel really, really supportive about it. Yeah. So I went from face planning to overcoming the obstacles of kind of the lack of self-confidence I had, which was a big thing for me.
Do you get nervous? You don't seem like someone who gets anxious. Do you battle with anxiety when you perform or play?
Sure.
You are oftentimes in a driver's seat, music directing and conducting, and you're always cool as a clam. So I just didn't know if that was something that you grapple with.
I definitely get nervous all the time before playing music or before at recording sessions, especially because I know that this is it. But I heard one time an actress who had been in a lot of big projects. She was asked, hey, do you get nervous before you go on? And she said, the day that I stop getting nervous is the day I stop doing this.
Right.
And they said, what are you talking about? She goes, well, I think being nervous means that you really care about what you're doing. And she said, the thing that I've learned is not to fight against the nervousness, but to use that as energy to kind of fuel your performance. And so that changed my whole outlook on that. And so I encourage anybody who gets really nervous to not feel like you're doing something wrong or not to let it get the best of you or to try to fight against it, but to
Right.
use it as energy, yet let the
Right.
nervousness fuel your performance.
Right. Give you superpowers and use it for good versus
Yeah.
the
Yeah. It's adrenaline.
sabotaging. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
What is the worst earworm you have had learning a show, or that it just gets inside you? This is contaminating my every cell.
Ooh. Well, I think you and I can both attest to this. By the time that I had started, and then by the time that I had stopped doing Jersey Boys, I had done it almost 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are a couple tunes in there that will just kind of pop in out of nowhere. And for me, I don't know about you, I'd love to hear your answer to this too, but for me, that was Oh What a Night. And for me, it was the little bridge. It wasn't the verse. Oh, what a night. It was, and I got a funny feeling when it do, wee boo boo boo. I'd be doing the dishes and I just think, bee boo ba doo. You know what I mean? That's the one that would always, I think, pop into my brain.
What is the ultimate phone rings? Bring. Hello. Taylor Peckham here. I have this gig for you, and it's doing this with this person at this place. What is it?
I was lucky enough to move to New York City to do a show about Donna Summer, the disco star. And I that was in 2018, and it was most of that year. And that show closed. We were all kind of anticipating it closing, but it closed a little sooner than we thought. And so at the beginning of 2019, I was left really not knowing what to do. I was in New York. I didn't really have any other job prospects. I didn't really know too many people. I was very lucky enough to have moved to New York with a job lined up, so I didn't have to do a whole lot of knocking on doors and networking. And it was, I would say it was very much a gift because I just could dive into the work. But then when the work went away, I didn't really have a community of people to lean on. So I was having to do a lot of networking that year. And I got a couple, I got in the door at a couple of gigs that I was really excited about, subbing at some Broadway shows, which was really fun. But then it was probably about August of 2019 when I got a very unexpected call on my cell phone. I was actually in the grocery store, and I got a call from a number I didn't know, and I let it go to voicemail, like we all do with numbers we don't know. And it said, "Hey, Taylor, this is Alex Lacamoire. And I got your name from a friend of mine, and I think you might be the right guy for this project that I'm doing." Alex Lacamoire was the guy who put all the music together for Hamilton. And he's done a lot of other projects, but that's kind of his biggest hit. And they were doing a show off Broadway by this guy who's a songwriter named Ross Golan, Golan. Check him out. He's got a great podcast too called "And the Writer Is," where they talk about, he's a pop songwriter. He writes for Demi Lovato, Harry Styles, a lot of huge acts, Charlie Puth. And so he's not only a fantastic songwriter, great guy. Anyway, he had written this piece that they were adapting into a show, and I got a call out of the absolute clear blue sky, based on a year earlier when I had sent in some keyboard audition tapes for Hamilton. And so it was off of those that he remembered me and gave me a call for this, and it ended up being one of the best things I had ever been a part of, and felt so lucky to be a part of. And every time I did that show, I just looked around with all the other band members who I was, again, it was such a pinch me moment. I mean, Alex Eckhart, our bass player, who is just one of the top calls in New York and has played with Sarah Bareilles and all these crazy people, and Dylan Condor, who's a guitar player and is Carole King's grandson and is an amazing musician. Jamie Eblin, who plays with everybody in town and is just a great guy. Anyway, so that was probably the most pinch me moment, was getting a call from him and getting to be a part of that and to music direct that show. It was called The Wrong Man. And the music from that is
it's so good. I flew out to New York and saw you in it.
Yeah, that's right. Kara got to come see it.
I jumped on a plane and I said, Taylor Peckham's got a show. I'm going to come out and support. And it was so good. The music was great. And those were great, hooky, earworm songs. Big
time. And there was the star of that show is a guy named Joshua Henry, who is on an Apple TV show right now, I think on TV. Anyway, he's an incredible, just monumental
Wasn't
talent.
He in Hamilton?
Yeah. He started the Chicago company as Aaron Burr.
We saw him here in Chicago as Aaron Burr.
Yeah,
so he was
monumental
kind of a superstar
talent. But he had a song in The Wrong Man called Stay Positive, and it was like the big moment of the show. The show is about, of course, the wrong man. It was about a guy who got wrongly accused for a crime he didn't
That never happens.
And this, I don't know what country it was set in. Maybe right? America, maybe. But he basically was realizing that he was probably gonna go to prison, and that he could either let it consume him or he could find some way to try and stay positive. And he sang this incredible song. And I just remember about halfway through the song, he's just screaming these big notes, and we're all just slamming these big, just all the guitar players are slamming their strings, and I'm slamming the keys, and our drummer's slamming the skins. And I just remember looking around and feeling like this is as good as this job is ever going to feel. Mm-hmm. And I was so lucky, and I just tap into that feeling of just that this is as good as it's ever going to feel. And I was so lucky to be a part of it. And that was a pinch me show and moment and feeling forever. And I'll have that forever.
Many thanks to my friend Taylor, with whom I'm proud to have shared the stage with many, many, many times over. As we wrap up today, we're taking the show out with Taylor's original song, Get Funked, performed by Taylor along with shout-outs to Jacob Chidester on guitar and John Simini on sax. You know the drill by now. Like the Weird Gig podcast on Facebook, subscribe to the pod, sponsor the pod, spread the word of the pod. Please be advised that this broadcast is intended to include a fair report or summary of commentary by one or more independent content providers. Any opinion expressed during this broadcast does not necessarily reflect the views of anyone else involved in conducting or presenting these interviews. We'll check in with you next week for a new episode and fascinating musician guests. Come for the stories, stay for the weird.